Hi, it's Marie from Marie's Scrappy Creations, where we sew the scraps of your life into beautiful creations. And this week, we're going to make a tote bag. We're going to take strips of scraps. So say that a few times fast. I got my scraps for this week's tutorial from a very nice lady over on Etsy. Her name is Kimberley, and she has a shop named My Fabric Addiction and the number 1. And when I told her that I had purchased a scrap pack of strips last year and how much I liked them, and I asked her if I could drop her link to my viewers, and she said sure. And in fact, when she heard that, she sent me some scrap packs. So we're going to use those scrap packs to make a beautiful tote bag. And if you like blue, you'll probably like it even better. I'm going to drop the link to her Etsy shop in the description box below. So if you need scraps, you know where to go. If you have your own scraps, you're all set. Let's have fun. Here we go. Okay, if you were here with us on Wednesday, I showed you that I received 2 of these strip packs in the mail, and they are called Scrappy strip packs. I bought some last April and I really liked them, and I contacted this Etsy seller and told her I wanted to tell you guys about her shop and what she had, and she sent me some scrap packs, and I want to make something out of them. So the first thing I did, I opened up the pack and I took out anything that was blue. It didn't matter if it matched. It didn't matter if it was the same shade of blue. I didn't worry about that. I just took out the blue. And I wanted to make a tote bag. So, look at this, huh? Okay, so there's one side, and I was undecided whether I should go in the same order on the other one, but I didn't. So this one is in an altogether different order, as you can see, from this one. So what I did is I cut the strips. They were pretty close to 2.5 inches, so I cut them at 2.5 inches and sewed them together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now you could do this with any kind of strips that you have, any width, it doesn't matter. You can make it work. You could use your crumbs. You could make a crazy block. You could do anything you wanted. This is just a simple tote. It doesn't get any easier than this tote bag, I promise. So the first thing that you need to do is, oh, and I'll tell you about the measurements here in a minute. But the first thing you need to do is either use fusible fleece or cotton batting. And since I have a lot of cotton batting, that's what I'm going to use. When I sewed my strips together, I opened the seams. A lot of people press them to one side. You do whatever you want to do. I feel on a bag they lay flatter if I leave them pressed open. So I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch down this cotton batting, and I'm probably going to use a serpentine stitch or a decorative stitch and stitch just on my sewing lines, and I'm going to do that on both of these. Now while I'm at it, I thought a pocket inside would be nice. So instead of just a pocket of one fabric, I thought I'd use some of the pieces that I had left from cutting the strips. So even if you don't have any strips left, or if you want to do this all scrappy, you could do that. This measures 8 inches wide by 18 inches. So I'm going to place right sides together, and I'm going to stitch around, and I'm going to leave a small, probably 3-inch opening on one side. And that's to turn the pocket right side out. So I also have my lining fabric, which kind of matches the pocket, as you can see. And the only other part I have is, whoops, what a mess, is the straps. So these straps I cut at 4 inches wide by 36 inches long. The first thing I did at the iron was I folded them in half like this, and I pressed to get a very nice crease, because you're going to be using that center crease to measure. And what you're going to measure is this. You're going to put your edges right towards the center. You see how that looks nice and neat? So once you have that center crease that you've ironed like this, it will be pretty simple to iron it towards the middle. And then you've got just about a 1-inch strap. So then, of course, I have scraps of everything, not just fabric. I'm going to place strips of cotton batting inside the fold. And I have made these with little tiny pieces of scraps. Believe me, you can do anything with scraps of this batting, because we're going to be sewing it down into the strap anyway, so it's not going to move. So the measurements that we have at this point are this. This is what you need. For your outer part of your tote bag, you need 2 18-inch squares. If you want them 20, if you want them 16, if you want whatever you want to do, you do. And you could make it longer one way than the other. It's just going to change the dimensions of your bag. So you do whatever you're happy with. I'm using 2 18-inch squares. I'm using cotton batting, so I do have it out over the edge. I just tend to do that. Or you could use fusible fleece. And the lining, I cut 2 at 18 inches square. They're just folded. The pocket, you want 1 or 2. You could put 1 on each side if you wanted. But you want it to measure 8 inches wide by 18 inches. That was just what I chose. And as I said, I thought that kind of looked nice, that the pocket will have a little bit of a scrappy look at the top to match the bag in a way. And again, your straps are cut at 4 inches wide by 36 inches long. And when I cut the cotton batting, I went just under 1 inch, at about 7/8 of an inch, so that it fits in there without bumping right up close to the edge, because you want to be able to fold it in there without it, you know, looking kind of wrinkled or anything. So what we're going to do first, I'm going to take these front pieces over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to quilt them down, and then I'm going to trim off the excess batting. Then I'm going to sew my pocket and my straps, and then I'm going to come back and show you. So remember, front sides together. Leave a 3-inch opening so that you can turn that pocket right side out, and we'll attach it to the lining piece after I get these 2 sewn. So I'll be back. Here we are, back with everything ready for our next step. So at this point we have our 2 18-inch pieces for the both sides of the front and back. How do you say that about a tote bag? Well, side A, side B. I've got my straps prepared. I sewed down 1/8 of an inch from each edge. I used, I don't know if you can see it, a serpentine stitch going down the middle to hold the batting in there. And then I always double check. I always start, I hold them, I go all the way to the other end to be sure that they're even, because sometimes after they've been sewn, you can get a little bit of a difference there. We don't want them to be too far off. And as I showed you earlier, when I have my opening of the pocket, I fold it back and iron it. So I've done that. I'm going to clip my corners. Don't clip too close, but you want to take out some of the bulk of that. If you want to snip around any of it, you certainly could. I'm going to leave it as is and flip it out. And I hope that the little just those little scrappy pieces that I put on the top of the pocket won't look odd, because I don't know, I love scraps, so I can't imagine that they wouldn't look good. So I need to get my little turner. I have a little, it was a dowel that my husband put a little face, little doll face, I guess is what's on it. And he sharpened it with a pencil sharpener and then blunted the end so that I can use it to turn things like this. And it's not too sharp, just what's needed, I guess. And I didn't have any reason for picking this size pocket. It just seemed to be what I wanted to do. So before I attach it, I will take it over and press it to make sure that I've got everything flattened and that I've got this straight, because sometimes that doesn't work perfectly, but it does help. So generally how I do this is I fold my lining in half and I crease it. A lot of times I iron it, to be honest, but I'm not going to since I'm on camera. I can see that line, but I'm going to put a pin there just to give a visual of the center. And then once I press this, I'm going to put the center. Then I'm going to see where I want it. Okay, let's say we'll pretend this is going this way. Okay, so I don't want it too far into the bottom. We're going to box those corners, so I don't want it too close because some of this is going to be folded over when we put our straps on. So let's see how far down that is. That looks about right to me, just eyeballing it. 3 inches. So let's go with 4, nope, let's bring it up. We're going to go with 3 inches, which is the width of this ruler. So it would go like this. And then when we stitch, I'm going to back tack, stitch all the way around, and it's going to close that hole, and then I'm going to come up here and back tack. But like I said, I'm going to press this first, then I'm going to stitch this on, and then we're going to be ready for our next step. So you meet me back here when you're at that point. Now we have sewn. I sewed all around the outside, flip this right side out. I sewed around the liner and left quite a wide opening, I'd say 4 inches. Top's open, pockets in there. Whoops, can you see the pocket? All right, we're going to leave the lining inside out. Okay, the straps. I probably should say I like my straps a little longer than some people do, so if you like shorter straps, you might want to go a little shorter than 36 inches. Okay, 4 inches from the edge of your bag, I want you to place your straps, and I want you to put just about a 1/4 inch up over the edge and pin or clip that into place, making sure not to twist your handle, your strap. Measure your other side, 4 inches, making sure it rises just above the edge. Pin it in place. So when you flip it over, it's going to be fairly easy to do the same thing because you're going to match it up from the other side. And then what we're going to do is go over to our sewing machine, and we're going to stitch it at the very top, like just barely catching just to hold it in place while we work on the rest of the bag. So I'm going to go over to the machine and sew it at about 1/8 of an inch away from the top. And then from there, we're going to put the bag together. See, I told you this was easy. There's nothing difficult about this bag. We're going to box our corners, which sounds hard, but definitely is not. And this is a really basic bag. This was the first one I learned, so I guess it's the first one I'm going to teach you. There are a lot of fancier ones you can make with zippers and all sorts of things, but we're keeping this really basic right now. And it's a beautiful bag. I love scraps, and a lot of times I've made bags using just squares, just simply squares. And I have a purse that I made out of scraps, and I had so many people stop me in a store and ask me if it was a Vera Bradley bag. Seriously. But anyway, okay, we're going to go over, we're going to stitch this, and then I'll meet you back here. Here we are. It's all sewn at the top. Guess I could have trimmed my threads a little more. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put it inside, just like this. This is right side out, right side facing. We're going to put it inside the liner, and the liner is still inside out. So you're going to place it in there. And you're going to line up your side seams to begin with. Right at your seams. Pin that together. When I think of these kind of bags, I really like to make them because they're quick. I've made so many of them, I can kind of put them together in almost no time now. It takes a little longer when I video it, number one, because I'm new to the whole video making process, but also because I have to stop and think of what I might need to explain or should explain. So that makes it a little more time consuming than it might be on my own. But I'm sure you have things like that you do too, whether it be cooking or whatever. Okay, so I'm just going around, straightening this, keeping it even with the top. And we're going to sew around the top using a 1/2 inch. No 1/4 inch here, folks. You want a good size seam, because we're sewing over that strap, and depending, I mean, if you use this for groceries or something, you're going to need it to hold up to a lot of weight. So you want to use a good chunky seam allowance there. Could you tell I have a cat? I think I find her hair everywhere. Okay, we're going to go sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Go all the way side to side, and then come back for the next step. Okay, all sewn. And I probably should have mentioned that I backstitch. I go back and forth a couple of times over each of the handles as I'm sewing around. Okay, now we're going to box the corners. Pull the inner, what's inside there, right to the outside. And we're going to take our ruler, I set it right here. Okay. So I'm going to measure, let's go 3 inches. So 3 inches from the side and from the bottom, make a mark with a pin. You're going to sew over it. Nobody's ever going to see that. So 3 inches, and we're doing this on both pieces, on the outer and on the lining. We're measuring 3 inches. Get that strap out of the way. Better get in there and grab it. Wants to be difficult. Yeah. And then guess what we're going to do with that? We're going to cut these squares right off. Just be fearless. And I will say this is not how I do it most of the time, but it's the way I learned. And as I said earlier, I wanted to do this the way I first learned to make a bag. And if you're a scrap saver like me, you're going to cut off those seam allowances and keep those little squares for your next project. And again, we're going to cut these. Okay, and if you've never done the next part, it's nothing to worry about. It will all turn out fine. You're simply going to do this. You're going to match your seams. Right? Just put seam to seam. Put a pin in it. And we're going to go do this to all 4 corners. So I'll show you one more. Seam to seam, keeping everything straight. Excuse me. Okay. So we're going to do this same thing to the liner. Matching the seams, pinning, and then we're going to stitch. And I use probably between a quarter, let's say a 3/8 inch. I usually do sew across there with a good seam allowance. So let's do that and come back. So here we have all of our corners boxed. This is what we call boxing our corners. And when I made my first bag, I would have flipped this right side out at this point and just sewn it shut. But I learned a little trick. So this is what we're doing. You see the straightaway here. I'm grabbing one end and the other end. I'm putting them together. I'm going to put a pin there to hold that. I'm going to go the other side, and this one looks a little trickier, but just follow the straight line. And you're going to put those edges together. And I know this looks silly, but there's a reason. You ever grab inside your tote bag, and when you bring out whatever you were grabbing from the bottom, you grab the bottom of the bag and it pulls out? Well, this keeps it from doing. We're going to sew right here through these 4 layers. You want to sew just to this side of your seam allowance. You just need to go back and forth a few times right there. Give that a try. Well, that didn't take long. I'm going to take my pin cushion off because I don't want to poke myself. Now, you find the hole that you left in the side. We're going to start working the bag out through. And at first it's going to look like it's not turning out right, but don't worry, it will. So you're just going to slowly work it little by little. Stuff it in through that hole, it'll work. Whoop. What's that? A string. Ooh, look at this, huh? This is looking like a bag. What a beautiful bag. I love these strips, these colors. I really, really do. Okay, now this is where I go in through the hole in the side, and I put my hand in there and I poke out my bottom corners just to make them pokey. All right. Now the bag is almost finished. Isn't it beautiful? What I'm going to do, I'm going to take this over to the iron and I'm going to press this down so that the top is even, and then I'm going to pin it. I like to pin things and keep them in place for when we top stitch. So when we top stitch, we're going to be grabbing the handle again. So now we'll have sewn over it 3 separate times, which should make it pretty sturdy. So I'm going to go press, pin, and then top stitch this. And I'm going to go about 1/4 of an inch from the top. You could use a decorative stitch, straight stitch, doesn't matter. Then from there, the only thing we have to do is sew up our opening on the inside. And you can do this by hand. And yes, I just poked myself with the pin. You can do this by hand if you want, which usually I do, but I think for time's sake today, I'm going to stitch it. But I also press this so that I've got a nice crisp line. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, we're going to close up that. We're going to press and top stitch our bag so that it will be done. So I'll see you back here in just a minute. Wow. Well, look at this. We've got a tote bag. And blue isn't my favorite color. I don't even know why I chose blue. I mean, I like blue. It's just not, I don't even know what to say my favorite color is, but I really like this. I like the pocket inside, and I'm glad that I used some of the scraps at the top so that it does blend in with the lining because it is mostly from that fabric. So I want to thank Kimberley from My Fabric Addiction 1 over on Etsy for providing me with the fabric to make today's bag. And I hope that if you guys need any scraps like what she sells, that you'll check out the link in the description. Every time it's different. When the last time I ordered, I got a really good variety of fabric, and this time I got totally different. I think there was only one fabric that I got that was the same as last time. And when you're working with scraps, you can really change that up. Oh, and I put one of my tags inside. It says handmade by Marie. I don't know if you can see that. I'm so terrible at holding stuff up to the camera. Anyway, I want to thank all of you for joining me for this week's tutorial for just a super simple, straightforward tote bag, all done with scraps. I think it's beautiful. I just used a piece of fabric that I had for the lining and the straps, although I could have used scraps for the straps as well. All right, I'll see you guys on What's Up Wednesday, and you can see what else I've been up to in my sewing room. Thank you, and please don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified of any upcoming videos, be sure to click the bell. Thank you all. Take care.